Hello. This year marks the 10th anniversary of Fallout New Vegas being released, and I wanted to make a video to show what I think might be, if not the most, one of the most optimized builds in the game, as well as some of the perks that go along with it, and I'll tell you why I think they're good. It's a build that consists of either wide and broad damage specialization, so you can be good with a good variety of weapons, or it's also containing perks that they may not be strictly about increasing damage, but they just add some neat functionality to the game, like increasing throwing range with a weapon or being able to make new types of mines. This video will feature a wide variety of weapons used and even a variety of clothing, despite the fact that critical chance is maximized by a certain set of clothing. I will show some roleplay of like NCR armor, Legion, Enclave, Brotherhood of Steel, and it'll show you that this build is optimal and viable with many different weapon types. So here's my rundown on your initial special stats. Strength should be high enough to get any associated perks you want, but you have to consider that perks like the Old World Blues Reinforced Spine will increase your strength, and then other perks like Rad Child incidentally will temporarily decrease your strength stat. So you want your strength stat to be relatively high, just to have a good initial carrying rate. And to meet any perks. Maybe for roleplay, you don't want to be like weak. Perception, you need it just high enough so that you can get better criticals. That's very important. Endurance, health isn't so important, but maybe for some perks, like Them's Good Eatin', I think requires 8 endurance. You need to have that statistic. So you could start out at like 7, because then you can get an implant to increase its value permanently and meet the requirement for that perk. Charisma, I'd say, is a dumb stat. It affects so little in the game. You don't need companions to fight. I think they make the game too easy, even 2 companions. They're very strong. It's like playing the game on easy mode. So what are you going to do with that? Intelligence is quite important, because overall you just want to have a good number of points for skills every single level. That's the only way you increase your skills, is leveling. You only get 50 levels. You're not going to use like the skilled glitch with traits. I think that's kind of cheesy. And it doesn't have as huge of an effect between having 1 and 10 intelligence, but it's still important. Agility is important, reasonably, maybe for VATs. Sometimes you use VATs, but it's mostly important for Slayer, for a melee build, which melee is a very practical skill out of all of them. But luck is probably the most important, because you need luck to get critical hits. Your initial critical chance before multiplier, it derives from luck. 10 luck is 10%. Then there are later perks like Finesse. There's the trait Build to Destroy, which increase it to 18%, and then associated clothing items can bump that up further before the critical multiplier. There's also flat multipliers like the one from Laser Commander or Light Touch that you should consider, but you basically need to factor in what you want your stats to be, and you have to factor in during the course of the game, can I raise the stat? For example, Perry Yorner wrote for Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 guides where he tells you what you might want for each special statistic, but also he indicates how much a stat can raise during the course of the game. Like with strength, you might only need 4, because power armor could raise it 3 or 4, plus any like random events that'll raise your strength or perks. So just consider what the implants could do, that all are capable of raising your stats by 1, and what special perks from like Old World Blues and stuff like that, how those things will affect your stats. For luck, you'd probably want 8, and then get an implant for luck, and then go through Lonesome Road and put that stat in luck. because you want to have your glasses slot free, and you don't want to have to use lucky shades to get to luck 10, because it kind of limits for a critical optimizer what you can wear. For skills, you should mainly consider that by the time you reach level 50, blessedly, thanks when you get all the DLCs, you have a lot of opportunity compared to the base game that caps at 30, where you can not only be forced, instead of just having to specify in a one particular build like it was in the base game, or specify a number of perks and really have to cut corners, you can really max out in the full collector's edition with all the DLCs. So basically, you can get everything almost, but there might not be points left over. I'm going to tell you the 2 skills I think you don't need at all. First is barter. Barter will give you lower prices on things, but you're still getting ripped off by most of the traders. That's just the way the game works. But nonetheless, you can get a lot of money in the game from selling the armor and weapons of high-level markmen, or even just fighting Deathclaws in the Thorn. I don't think you should choose barter, because there's a point in the game where you can become accepted by the Great Khans, and there's a Great Khan armorer that if you have 25 barter, which is pretty low, if you get skill books and you're accepted with them, you will be able to trade on a 1-to-1 ratio of their value that they charge for the actual value of the item. So you can buy tons of ammo, and they have everything you want there. Just, you don't need to buy at the gun runners, except when you want to buy unique weapons. And the other skill I'd tell you is lockpicking, because lockpicking just is not important. No. In some of the previous games it was important, but there are very, very few instances where there's something you cannot get through due to lockpicking. For whatever reason, they designed the game like that. Maybe to make it easier, dumb it down. Maybe it was because they didn't want people to feel forced to do a stealthy, furtive roleplay. But the only thing I can think of typically that you can't get is the Gobi campaign sniper rifle, which is something I wouldn't even use anyway. Other than that, almost every single skill you're going to want to get, and a combination of your leveling and the skill values, you're going to want them to be very close to 100 by the time you reach level 50. Speech, for example, though, it's a non-combat skill, so you can have it at, say, 70 or something, and then have maybe a clothing item buff it 10 points, and then have a skill magazine with comprehension buff it up to 100. Skill magazines can compensate a lot of times. Not that they're useful really or necessary for that point, but if there's something you have to dump a little bit and not fully level, you can use those and leverage that weakness. My choice in traits is pretty simple. You want to choose built to destroy, which is pretty good. You want to have the highest critical chance, and the offset negative side of this perk is very low. It only means that weapons last 97% as much as they normally would, but having 3% before your multiplier on the critical chance is huge. My other perk is called Hot Blooded, which increases your damage by 10% when your health goes below 50%, which, if you're doing things right, shouldn't happen a lot, but things don't run so smooth in this line of business, especially when the wasteland's got some of the deadliest creatures in the planet. So I think that's a good choice, because your health can go below 50%. And to me, it seemed more relevant than a lot of those perks where, your stats go up during daytime, but they go down during nighttime. No. Anything involving special stats in the first place is extremely marginal. It's not like in Fallout 2 or 1, the gifted trait, which would give you a slight decrease to skill gains, but it'd give you +1 to every single stat. Skills weren't even that important in the game. So basically those two perks. Wild Wasteland, the alien blaster's just not that practical. There's only so many charges. You just hold it, use it on the legendary Deathclaw, you cheese it. And then you go to the Hoover Dam battle and you use a weapon that it's fun in the first couple games because it's like a cool Easter egg, but should this really be canon, legit? Should Mothership Zeta be accepted? No. Kind of ruins the whole point of the game. The whole thesis that like humans destroyed the planet through their own means. Now, other than that, those are basically the two perks you should choose. Heavy-handed drops your critical chance. That's terrible. You don't want the one loose cannon because you want to be able to throw far, I think. And I think any perk that affects throwing also affects gravity-based weapons like the grenade machine gun or the Fat Man or a grenade rifle. You don't want a perk that drops your range on anything because it decreases functionality significantly, whereas you know what you're getting into with a throwing weapon, how fast it should be throwing. You don't really need that much DPS. If you're going to choose a spear like a tribal, you're kind of going for things to be the hard way anyway. Maybe rushing water could help you with that anyway, so it doesn't matter. In starting a good new game, a good path to go, instead of going through all that nonsense where you have to go down to Prim, get harassed by the guy with the dog on his head, Nipton, and all the powder gangers, all the stupid jackals, go through Novak. No, you don't have to do that. You can just go straight to New Vegas in the most direct and one of the most dangerous ways. Up through the Good Springs Graveyard, then go by the Yangtze Memorial, and then you'll approach Sloan after you go past an abandoned shack and you deal with some scorpions. The guy in Sloan, Chomps Lewis, will tell you, don't go through. We've had some death claws and we can't get any work done. Instead, you start to approach northeast towards Black Mountain, where the super mutant Neil will tell you, don't go through here either because there's Tabitha and her Nightkin, former servants of the Master's army. They're crazy. So what you do is you straddle the line around these like bluffs and escarpments, and you kind of just crawl up to where you get on like the side of a cliff, and you might see some Deathclaws patrolling below. So you have to keep crawling and scaling across a cliff, curving around until you're parallel with the Repticon headquarters, and then once you've given the Deathclaw the slip, then you just start running, and you make it to Repcon. You should be good by then. Repcon is a great place because it comes with a unique plasma rifle if you just go through the whole thing, and you get like a key card to keep you safe from the robots, and then you get a luck guess, which you'll get because you should have chosen luck, like I described earlier. And then you can get to the third floor and get access to the first floor with the unique plasma rifle and 500 microfusion cells. Then you can go to Freeside, and you can bust out the Atomic Wrangler with Blackjack because you've got good luck. You can save and reload. Then you can also head over to good old Van Graff's, and you can go right in there, pick up a plasma caster, the old-fashioned plasma rifle from Fallout 1 and 2. Just go there, go into the back room and take it. Steal it and sneak. They're not going to notice. They're not very good with their supplies, are they? So then you can go and make the cap count you need to go to get into Vegas, and go to the Gomorrah, get right up to where you're about to bust them out. Just like, take all their money, be a whale. Then go to the White Glove Society, their casino, the Ultralux, and nearly bust them out. They have a higher limit. Now you should have a ton of caps relative to what you need, and you can go back to the Gunrunners and buy yourself some Combat Armor Mark II, and you've got some pretty good gear right off the bat. Easy stuff. Then you can go back to where you're near Hidden Valley, and maybe you bring Veronica from the 115 trading post, and you won't have to have a bomb collar around your neck, but you can do a lot. You talk to McNamara, you get rid of the lockdown, sort of, because they had a bad run-in with the NCRs, you might know, and basically, once you do that, you have to do like a series of things like investigate where some lost patrols are. They're all dead. One at Black Mountain, one near the Boomers, and I can't remember where the other one is, but once you do that, you'll have to get a bunch of parts from different vaults. One from Vault 11, Vault 22, and like it'll basically take you around the Mojave. But once you go to these locations for McNamara, you'll get full membership in the Brotherhood and your own set of power armor, and you'll probably go up to a reputation of liked. You can also do this with Hardin, which I think can be more fun from roleplay, because he'll give you a quest. You just have to help him find a reason why McNamara broke the chain that binds. And if you do that through the records, you solve a virus, you can oust him and put Hardin, who's kind of like a hard ass, in power. Hardin will ask you to go to the same Van Graffs you ripped off and kill them. There's a very funny way you can do this, and killing the Van Graffs helps you in like 2 different quests, one for Cass as well, Rose of Sharon Cassidy. Basically, you can sign up to work for them, and you're supposed to guard the door with the guy at the front. And one of the guys that's in there got his family, I guess, killed, and he's going to suicide bomb them. So what you should do, you can just let him go in and take out all the Van Graffs for you and solve the quest 10 for your business. That's a way you can get it with Hardin. Now, with McNamara, the other vault that I hadn't mentioned was Vault 3. And you're going to want to do some Great Khan's quests, which will help you with the thing I mentioned before about the Great Khan Armory. You're going to want to go to him, or the Great Khans, and do some, like, drug, I guess, oriented missions, and sell to people, because you only get a dialogue option with the Fiend's leader, Motor Runner, once. So just go and do that, and get it wrapped up. There's like another minor quest with like a trapped NCR guy, so you might want to consider that too. But you just want to kind of like peaceably infiltrate in there and get the item you need, get all the quests done you need, and go back. You got power armor now. You got a Great Khan's move. I don't use it, but you know. And what can be better than that? So now I will discuss my perks alphabetically, and I will go through all of them, and I will tell you why I think they are good. So, first, we have the Atomic perk. The Atomic perk will grant you plus 25% attack speed and movement, which is really good in irradiated areas, and you can use coyote meat, potentially, as a way of getting this perk temporarily wherever you want. It's a pretty good perk for melee characters. More melee speed, that gives you more critical damage, more damage output. This is what you want. Then it also gives you a bonus to your action point restoration, no matter what, if you got like deadly radiation poisoning. So you want this one. Better criticals gives you 1.5 times the damage for a critical attack. It's essential for a critical build. Now, you have Chemist, which is a very important perk. Chemist will double your consumable effect times. So let's say Hydra lasts for like 10 seconds, it'll last for 20 seconds here. It pretty much affects everything, as far as I understand. I chose Comprehension because there's a book called True Police Stories, which will give you plus 5% critical chance, but with this, it'll give you plus 10. So it could have a potentially really good effect on DPS for critically based weapons, especially weapons that rely heavily on critical damage. For example, the Aveline Kit limited edition BB gun, which is a nod to the old-fashioned LE BB guns in the first 2 games. You're going to want that. Now, it has to be taken in combination, I think, with Voracious Reader, because that perk will make those magazines more common. So I think those 2 perks can be important, but if you don't think they're necessary, I think they are very practical for a critical build no matter what. You might want to take 2 ranks instead of Demolition Expert, because I only took 1, and if you're going to use explosives a lot, if you think they're good and important to a build, especially if you have a lot of carrying space, because you're not taking hardcore mode, you should choose Demolition Expert instead 3 times. I only chose it once. Now, the next perk I will describe is Eye for an Eye. This is a perk that you choose, and if you're crippled for 5 limbs, you get plus 50% damage. Comes with some downsides. Namely, those downsides are a decreased accuracy in and out of VATS and slower movement, annoying movement. But you can pretty much remedy every single issue with this just by taking steady, which you can get a ubiquitous supply of at the end of Dead Money. Speaking of Dead Money, there's a perk that's a special perk called Elias's Ramblings. You get it by not giving his holotape to Veronica Santangelo, and you want to do this because this is going to be a single player build, no companions anyway, and you really want that damage. It's very important for a critical build. Now there's Finesse, which gives you plus 5 luck essentially, so instead of 10% base critical chance for the multiplier, you get 15%. That is very important for a critical build. Now, there's Handloader, and Handloader will give you access to stuff like a unique 12.7mm ammo. It's really good. You also want a unique 5mm ammo. Basically, it makes your gun oriented combat as good as it can be. And it gives you a fun kind of like custom crafting thing where you're more inclined to break down ammo and make yourself more powerful that way. That's what I do when I show the minigun in this video. It's better than Vigilant Recycler because Vigilant Recycler only gives you plus 5% damage over an overcharged version of any given energy cell. Now, you have Heave Ho, which is just like a practicality matter. It'll increase the damage or range of any weapon that launches something. So you're going to want Heave Ho because you can shoot grenades farther, you can throw grenades farther from your hand, and more importantly, you could essentially snipe enemies with spears, which I think is really funny. Who wouldn't want to be like a tribal sniper? Now, next perk I chose twice is Implant GRX. Bullet time, slowing down time, is really good. You basically, with all the other perks combined, can get a minute-long version of this effect, and it's very important to help you survive Deathclaws often. Makes different melee strategies more viable. I mean, I showed in my video, you can take down a whole group of Deathclaws with spiked knuckles. You could even take down a Deathclaw with your bare fist, but there's a lot of DT negation that they do, or they negate your damage with DT, and your criticals with your bare fists are really nothing. So it's going to take you 5 minutes to kill one. Who wants to see that? I didn't take, as I said, Demolition Expert, but who needs, like, the difference between 2,000 damage and 3,000 with the unique Fat Man S.P.E.C.I.A.L against any enemy? Nobody, because they'll die. And I just feel that, like, a grenade machine gun is kind of like a niche usage, and you can replicate the damage bonus almost that those 2 ranks of the perk could give with Slasher and Yao Guai Meat. The next perk I would discuss is Jury Rigging. Jury Rigging allows you to repair items that don't have many items that can repair something with. Like if they only have 1 item, now they can repair almost everything from that class. For example, maybe you want to repair a plasma caster with a Gatling laser, you can do it. It makes it really easy to play the game and find something to repair and not spend thousands of caps on repairing, because some items otherwise wouldn't have anything you could repair them with. Now, at level 50, there's Just Lucky I'm Alive. It essentially adds onto the effect, or it multiplies from 1.5 to 2.25 times the critical damage of any given weapon. You want this, it'll work in conjunction with Elijah's Ramblings for melee, but it'll increase your damage for every single other weapon to 2.25 times. It's better than the other two perks. Because you don't want 100 extra health. That's extremely marginal, and 10% extra damage with Thought You Died. And the increased attack speed, it doesn't work universally like for automatic weapons. And there's other ways to get that going. And critical damage is a better way to maximize melee damage anyway than attack speed. Now, you got Laser Commander. It's so good because it'll make the a unique weapon called the Compliance Regulator crit often enough that it's really effective for stopping any enemy. Like, you can stop 4 Deathclaws at once, or you can cheese a lot of the enemies in the game that might be hard by immobilizing them, like David did with the slingshot in the Bible to Goliath, and then kill them with a melee weapon. You can save on ammo that way too, rather than just like firing a machine gun and missing a lot at a moving target. No, it affects the other weapons I use, and since its critical chance is a flat bonus, it'll benefit Gatling lasers and make them viable. Light Touch does a similar thing. It stacks with the effect of Ulysses Duster, and you want this perk. Basically, you'll have maximized critical chance with a flat bonus to your critical chance that doesn't come from the multiplier. It's just additive. If they had stuff like that, all the way up to like 50% critical chance, automatic weapons would be broken. Now, you do have the perk Lonesome Road, which you just have to leave Edie in the silo, but it does have a lot of roleplay implications, so pick it if you want. It gives you more damage, but you have to do potentially a very bad thing, because you can't stop the nukes that way. Mad Bomber gives you access to microfusion cell clusters, which are like a mix between like cluster bombs and like, it's like kind of like a mine, but it also works like a grenade. It's pretty cool. And nuka grenades are very powerful explosives no matter what. They're almost like the holy hand grenades of Antioch you can get in Wild Wasteland. Meltdown gives you plasma explosions for every laser weapon. It's practical for crowd control, and it's just really fun to watch. Now, Nuka Chemist is important if you want to make use of those Nuka grenades, because you can't make many when there's a limited number of Nuka Quantum. But this way you can brew Nuka Quantum at your pleasure. Purifier is another perk, and it affects Deathclaws, and it'll make your melee game against Deathclaws quite powerful. I highly recommend it because they're some of the only enemies in the game that are even worth fearing or fighting. Now, there's Pyromaniac, which is kind of a personal choice. You may or may not want it, but Pyromaniac will give you plus 50% damage with any fire weapon, which I think for a single perk is quite significant. You may or may not want the weapons it affects, but I think it can work pretty well with, like, say, Gehenna, the unique shish kebab, and the aforementioned Purifier perk. Radchilds will give you 8 healing per second, 8 hit points restored every second when you're at deadly rad poisoning. It makes you really effective to heal with radiation while you're in a combat situation, rather than have to lean on stim packs and all that kind of stuff. It saves you resources in typical situations. Then you've got Slayer, which increases your attack speed. More attacks per second, more criticals. Simple as that. Then you've got Super Slam, your melee attack speed. You take that, and you have a % chance to knock down an enemy. Basically, you can stun lock enemies and win that way. Then there's Them's Good Eatin', which may or may not be necessary. But in terms of practicality, it does add 2 healing items to the game that are very effective, and they are ubiquitous. Almost every single enemy has them. So you want this perk, I think, because you can upgrade these healing items. They sell for a lot, so it's a guaranteed source of money. And they will ultimately give you more healing opportunities. It ties into the theme of versatility of this build. And finally, I describe Voracious Reader, which is a perk that, like I said, combines with comprehension to give you a limitless supply of critical boosting true police stories magazines. So, namely, what I do with the builds right now is rely upon 2 critical multipliers, each 1.5 times to equal 2.25 times the base critical damage of any weapon I use. And I already have a number of perks modifying damage, helpfully. So you have the weapon called the Microfusion Hyperbreeder Alpha, and it's a weapon that is a very overpowered version of the Recharger pistol. It's kind of like a laser submachine gun that produces its own ammo. You might as even well call it like a ranged melee weapon, because you never run out of ammo. And the only thing you have to worry about is it losing its condition. But I have the Jury Rigging perk, which allows me to not worry about that, because as long as I can find any old laser pistol or plasma pistol, it's good. You can find those in Lonesome Road somewhat often. So basically, I use that, and because I've got the set lasers for fun perk, that's a, I guess, special perk that you get just by doing a lot of laser damage, and Lord Death increases damage. A number of perks. Lonesome Road perk also does it, where you leave Edie in the silo. That really helps you. And what it boils down to is that with the Eye for an Eye perk, which can increase your damage by 50% for 5 limbs crippled, and you can compensate for aim loss with steady speed. Walking speed you can compensate for with atomic if you're in an irradiated area, typically. You get what says a base damage of 50, but a damage over time of 350. So 7 shots per second, not too bad, especially since it recharges while you're firing it often. And if you can manage your usage of firing and kind of like fire and then not fire, you're pretty well off. Now, with this weapon, what makes it special is that it's an automatic weapon, more or less. But it has the critical multiplier of a normal weapon, like a semi-automatic weapon. That's pretty broken. And I think the only other weapon I can think of at the moment that somewhat imitates that is a survivalist rifle, which is a much more powerful version of a service rifle chambered for 12.7 millimeter ammunition, and that's basically a 50 caliber bullet with less charge. I don't even know if it's a realistic bullet, but basically with this perk you're going to be getting a lot of critical damage. The damage is effectively going to be like 700 per second. Now with very hard difficulty it halves your damage, so you're only getting 350. But that means that the toughest enemies are going to die within less than 2 seconds on very hard. And that doesn't even go into like the flagpole weapon Old Glory that Ulysses used, that has 80 base critical damage. So that is 200, maybe 260 or 70 critical damage, plus its base damage of 40 is about 300. And you can swing pretty fast with it with Slayer, with Rushing Water, with a little bit with like irradiated effects you have, but you're really going to be knocking anything out with like a 50% critical rate with that weapon. And you could buff it further with True Police Stories, which is increasing your critical chance further. But in the course of things, I use Ulysses Duster, which increases your critical chance by 5%. Then it's a light armor, so it increases your critical chance with a flat critical chance of 5%, but that's after the multiplier. So that means that something before the multiplier, if the multiplier's higher, it makes a bigger effect. If it's a really low multiplier, like for machine guns, but there is a multiplier, then a flat one is going to benefit you more. For example, a weapon that would never get critical hits, like a Gatling laser, can get up to 1 in 5 shots being critical with all the clothing. And then the other thing I wear is the first recon beret, which increases it by 5%. And there isn't really any combo of clothing that does quite as good as all those things put together. Now, typically I don't even need to use any consumables, because you can just shake it off and not have anything healing. If you have good strategy and you choose your targets carefully, you don't need them. But in the course of this video, I show a lot of footage where I'm putting myself out in the open and attacking a lot of strong enemies, some of the best enemies in the game. And Death Claws, they do 125 damage, the normal ones. So that's 250 on hard mode, or very hard, without any defensive abilities. And what are you going to do with that? Basically, the only way to really survive, especially when they were taking you on a lot, is use Implant GRX to slow down their movement so they can't attack you and you can evade them better. And take Battle Brew, Slasher, and Med-X, which will give you 85% damage resistance, which is broken. I mean, Fallout 3 had damage resistance commonly, but this game doesn't. I mean, the whole effect of DT, where armor piercing can be good sometimes, but sometimes you don't want to have hollow points because of DT, and getting over that, it's an interesting mechanic. Sometimes weak ammo, or weak armor can fend off weak bullets very well. But most of the time, DT is not helpful. Even if you could get really high DT by like taking Cass's Whiskey perk, Remnant's Power Armor, and Toughness perks, and Implants, all of that, it's not going to really help you against an anti-material rifle. That's armor piercing, anti-tank. So you're going to need all those health things, or defensive things, but you'll also need like super stim packs, and to compensate for some of the effects of the crippling perk, Eye for an Eye, which gives you great damage, mostly for non-critical weapons that get most of their damage, or all, from regular damage and not criticals. That would be miniguns, for example, machine guns, explosives for sure, like grenade machine gun, Fat Man. Those, you want Eye for an Eye, definitely. And then you just want to have the one other concern with, anti-material rifle, armor piercing marked men, even after your DR is being, 85, is that even with really good armor, you could have something like in the Deathclaw Promontory, where you have a ton of Deathclaws attacking you at once, and your 85 DR isn't going to help you, because let's say you have 85 DR and their attack, let's say it was calculated before the very hard multiplier, what the damage would be. If you have 85% of 125 and it comes out to like 18.75 or something like that, if that's what it comes down to, and then your armor has a DT that negates that further, and then let's say on very hard it's doubled after that, that's how I think it works. That could be great, well and great, but you can have a ton of Deathclaws attacking you at once, and a Mother Deathclaw, which does a lot more damage than the regulars, and the potential for its damage to double attacking you. mauling you, dogpiling you. So you're just gonna want to have healing items like a super stem pack. Stuff like just about anything you need of regular items you can get from the Sierra Madre. Once you complete Dead Money DLC, there's a vending machine which you get free chips for all the time, and it's like the welfare of the Fallout world. You get stem packs, super stem packs, steady, you get buff out, you get medics. You don't really have to get any of those ever again. Now, stuff like Battle Brew, there's definite limits on how much you can get anyway, because mutant cave fungus, that is an ingredient of it, you have to get in Old World Blues in one particular cave. And you can get like 20 at a time there, but that's still pretty good. Do you want to farm it a little bit? Then, Med-X is very common. Slasher, you get from banana yucca fruit, for example. And Psycho, you have to buy the Psycho. The banana yucca you can get from Old World Blues with this like farming mechanism they have that makes it easy. Another ingredient for the Battle Brew is salient green, which is like a kind of science fiction-y element that you just take and make out of food products. And that's pretty easy to get as well. But the limiting factor there is vodka, and you can't get much vodka unless you go to like the bars. There's one instance in Dead Money where you could have gotten it, but in my case, I don't know how much. Basically, conceivably, there are a ton of healing items you can stack together. That's one of the powers of this game, and it's kind of crazy that whereas other games emphasize like the meta being having tank tier armor, like mobile tank armor that is hardened power armor or Enclave APA, this game pretty much takes a dump on the old guard of the powers that dominated New California, like Brotherhood of Steel and Fallout 1 were the only main power besides maybe the hub, and Fallout 2, the Enclave was the big boogeyman that was threatening the world. The NCR, they don't wear much armor, and they run by attrition. They're in a tough campaign. Caesar's Legion wears like sporting goods, so the whole game seems to emphasize this like badass, like I don't wear armor and I just take drugs aspect to it. Very Mad Max of them. Well done. But you can get a lot of different healing items, and you can combine them together. Some are more practical than others. Like I took a perk, Them's Good Eatin' is what it's called, and almost every single living creature will provide you with blood sausage or thin red paste. You can refine these into more powerful versions, but even the basic versions have decent healing rates. And Rad Child will have a good healing rate. There is a school of thought that some people have proposed where you can take a perk or a trait called Logan's Loophole, which stops your level at 30, but for maximization, this is not what you want. Because you don't get access to the level 50 perks that make your character so powerful. No. Because with Chemist, perks like that, and some other special perks, like one that increases your turbo length, I think called Day Tripper or something like that, you get long enough to last you for an encounter, and then after you do an encounter, you might travel with fast travel, and it's done. You lose all the effects of a given item. You have to use more. You're better off not taking that perk to double the length of things and just go with having your perks last or your consumable effects. And the crux of all this is that even if, only in a case where you're carrying an absurd number of consumables can you be truly safe. Because you'll find in a place like the Courier's Mile, the death claws there are irradiated death claws. They don't have DT, so you can use survivalist rifle and you can have 12.7 millimeter hollow points like a charm. It does them in good, but they do more damage than a legendary Deathclaw with each of their attacks. Any Deathclaw in Lonesome Road at level 50. So you really want to watch out for those. Basically, even at this meta level where you're carrying a fair number of consumables and your DR, you just got to watch out. They can really kill you. Like, if you don't use Implant GRX and use some evasion and just swipe right through them with melee first, they can still kill you. And not much is going to change that, because it is actually good balance when you can make a character that's incredibly overpowered, but still have endgame characters that make you fear. Without consumables, the game's still, at the higher echelons, very much a sudden death match between you being incredibly dangerous and the enemy squishy, and the same going for you.